I used to work at a large international company in an inside sales role where we were paid on a salary plus commission basis. My boss sucked, there was no career path, and the corporation was an incoherent mess, but the team was cool and the money was good, so it wasn't a bad gig overall. Fast forward to the end of my second year on the team and our boss calls a team meeting where his boss announces that after a long, protracted battle with the Department of Labor our team were being reclassified as hourly employees, and going forward we would need to submit timesheets in order to receive our base earnings. Needless to say, since we were accustomed to taking all the free time available to us during the day for lunch, coffee smoke breaks, etc., not to mention accruing and using vacation time that no one actually bothered tracking, this was not a popular decision. After a few minutes of us arguing and pushing back against this, my boss announced that the decision was done and we earned the bulk of our pay through commissions, so we'll just have to deal with it. Okay, fine. At this point I feel that I should mention that I have a somewhat casual relationship with time. When it comes to important things like client appointments I'm always prompt and ready to go right on time, but in terms of showing up for work exactly when I need to start my day, or 15 minutes early as some bosses expect, is just not my thing. My attitude has always been that, as long as you're producing and getting your job done, who cares if you're 15 minutes late in the morning, or take an extra long break in the afternoon, or peace out right at 5 on the dot. It's an office job, not one where someone else is relying on my promptness to end their shift. I've consistently been a top 2 or 3 performer, and while I've had my share of obligatory please show up on time conversations with bosses, they eventually realize I'm super productive, so just let me do my thing. So now I need to start documenting my time. I check the official hour notice about the change and my role is expected to work a maximum of 40 hours a week. And now that I'm an hourly employee instead of salaried, I'm, surprise surprise, eligible for overtime. Well, if I'm forced to do this, and rules are rules, then I'm going to document my hours perfectly. I start noting exactly when I show up at the office in the morning, start and end of every break, and exactly when I leave down to the minute. At the same time I started to work straight through my lunch hour and I started showing up a few minutes earlier than usual to start my day too, to clock in properly. I started submitting timesheets for 45 to 50 hours a week, and started to bank a fat chunk of overtime at time and a half per paycheck that I previously was ineligible for, and was not budgeted for by the company. Fast forward a few weeks and my boss calls me over to his desk. He had my timesheet up with start and end times like 8:23 am and 5:12 pm, etc., and was not happy. I forget what exactly he said, but he basically told me to knock it off and round my times to the official start and end time like everyone else on the team. He wasn't a bright individual, and I realized 3 things. He just didn't like counting my hours to the minute. Basic math is tough. He never said anything about my non-existent lunch breaks, and he either knew nothing or said nothing about my odd pay. No problem, boss, you got it. From then on my start and end times matched the official times, but I continued to either work through lunch or take only 30 minutes of the allocated 60 minutes and continued to submit timesheets with 2 to 5 hours of OT. I never heard another peep from my boss, and a few weeks later they quietly discontinued the manual timesheets and just paid us in full at our annual salaried rate. So this just happened today. First, a little bit of backstory and context. I work for an agency that specializes in disaster relief. I'm basically a professional note picker, and it works like this. When a town or city or some other place suffers some kind of disaster and want to get reimbursed for damages and repair expenses and the like, they contact us and send in an application. This application has to include certain kinds of documents in order to be eligible for any funding, and some of those documents have to be laid out a certain way. For example, if you have to hire a bunch of laborers to help clear debris or something, you have to tell me who worked how many hours on which day, how much they were paid per hour, how much they were paid in total, that sort of thing. If your application gets to me and doesn't have all the bells and whistles, one of 3 things happens. Your application is rejected, your application is sent up the chain minus whatever I can't validity, meaning you get less money than what you were originally asking to be reimbursed for, or I send it back to you to be reworked. I usually do everything I can to avoid the first two because I know how hard it can be to recover from a disaster when you have to pay for stuff out of your own pocket. But today I made an exception, courtesy of some good old-fashioned malicious compliance. So I get this new project. It lands on my desk with a thud. It's an application from a small rural town of only a few hundred people that was heavily damaged by severe rains and flooding. Trees knocked over, power lines destroyed, you name it. They got hit real bad and had to hire a lot of people to help clean up afterwards, and they're applying for over 20 grand in reimbursement. Anyway, in passing through it, going over my checklist, making sure everything is in order, about 5 seconds and I realized that whoever put this garbage pile of a project together either didn't know what they were doing or didn't care enough to find out. Shoddy or missing paperwork, broken files, incoherent notes and add-ons. You name it. So I make a list of all the things that are wrong with the project and call up the project supervisor. In other words, the guy the town hired to put the application together, to see if he and I could work together to fix them. I tell him that I won't be able to validate the project for the full dollar amount with what I've been given, but the guy cuts me off, calls my competence, intelligence, and professional integrity into question, accuses me of trying to stiff the town, and calls me several choice names. He ends by saying it better make do with what I've been given, and that it's not his job to do anything more than what has already done. I'm pissed, but I hang up the phone and go talk to the boss. I ask the boss what I should do. I already knew what he was going to say, but I wanted to make sure I covered all my bases. Sure enough, he sympathizes, tells me to validate whatever costs I can, and ignore the rest. I tell him that doing so will result in a drastic reduction in the amount of money the town receives. He tells me that it's not the agency's problem if the project supervisor refuses to cooperate. Malicious compliance activated. I go back to my desk. I do exactly as the boss instructed. I validate what costs I can and ignore the rest. I damned well make do with what the project supervisor has given me, just like he said. It amounts to a little over $5,000. I double check my work, then triple check it before kicking it up the chain for final review. The whole project was done and dusted by lunchtime. I also know I'm going to get an earful from the project supervisor, and I'm not disappointed. Around 2 in the afternoon I get a call from him, and as soon as I pick up he starts ranting at me. As soon as he does, I call the boss over. I tell him that my boss is on the line, and the boss basically tells the guy that it's his own stupid fault. The project supervisor doesn't care and continues to scream at me. He says that I'm trying to cheat him by leaving out the missing funds. When he finally pauses because he has to breathe, I smile and tell him that he'll just have to make do with what I've given him, and that it's not my job to do anything more than what I've already done. I hang up before he can say anything else. Then I call up the guy at the town city hall who hired the project supervisor to let him know what's happened and exactly who to blame. And since small town gossip spreads faster than the bubonic plague, I'll bet you anything that the project supervisor will find himself on the receiving end of the entire town's hatred by this time tomorrow. And he deserves it. I had been part of the project team for a client for years now. However, one day, my project manager took me off the project for a week, meaning that I was no longer working on anything. They said that it was to give me a break, but it was likely due to budget reasons. Perhaps the project was overstaffed. I knew I was valuable enough that they wouldn't keep me free for long, so I decided to take advantage of my workation. I read blogs, listened to podcasts, and watched videos. Oh, so many videos. I had recently discovered Good Mythical Morning on YouTube and took to watching all the back episodes. Now we had a limit on streaming bandwidth, which allowed a maximum of 1-1.5 hours of streaming. However, some time ago, I had gotten permission to increase my bandwidth to about 3 times that for a project requirement, and they had never bothered to revoke that privilege. So if I watched at 144p, I could watch YouTube all day. So whenever my project manager or even the COO crossed my desk on their way somewhere, they saw me watching videos all the time. A coworker told me that she had been tasked by the project manager to subtly ask me to knock it off. I said, I don't have work. What do they expect me to do with my time? Needless to say, I never got put on another break until I quit the job myself. We were paid monthly and not on project basis, so it didn't affect my paycheck. Thank you for watching. Slap that like button and comment your opinion on these stories below. I'm waiting. Write that comment. Seriously. Have you written it yet? If you don't comment, you make a bunny cry somewhere. You're not that kind of person. I know. Anyways, peace out and catch you tomorrow.